All right, let's get started. Thanks very much for coming. My name is Simon Eady. I work for a company called Extrovert as a senior consultant. I'm a Southwest UKVMUG leader, sort of Bristol, Wales, that kind of the way. So no one really goes there, but it's cool. I blog at definite.co.uk with my chief editor and colleague Sam McGowan. I'm also on Twitter, so if you want to reach out to me after this, after you've gone home, you want to ask me questions about this or anything else to do with vROps, Twitter's pretty much the best place to get me on. And I'm on LinkedIn, so if you want to connect there, that's fine too. Quick thing here about this book. It was written by a guy called Matthew Stein. I'll be giving away 2 copies today of this for any really good questions. But the reason I want to direct you to it is if you want to buy it, so if you don't get to win a copy, but you want to buy it, all the proceeds go to charity. So it's a really good book for getting to grips with vROps. Okay, I'd like a show of hands on who currently has vCops, not vROps, vCops. Anyone got vCops still? Okay. Are you guys planning on migrating anytime soon? Yes. Okay. Who's got vROps? And who's got the latest version of vROps? Not 6.4, because I know that GA sort of yesterday. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so what we're going to cover today. We'll have a quick look at what's new in vROps, and I mean very quickly, because I know you're here about the subject matter. But it's good for you to get an understanding of what's new in vROps. We'll cover what's, what is self-healing datacenter, what does it mean? What were the past constraints, because it was actually possible beforehand with vCops. We'll have a look at the overview, we'll look at the components. We'll go for a requirements checklist so you can see everything that's required to make this actually possible in vROps. And I'll show you via sort of fixed slides how it comes together. And I'll also play a video that was essentially recorded from a webinar I did back in January, where I did a live demo of this working. And there was no way I was going to try that again, because that was super stressful. Getting anything like that to trigger in 60 minutes is pushing your luck. So I'll take that. So we'll use that video as a quick a demo as well. We'll do a review, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. Okay, so what's new in vROps? So we all know that 6.3 came out in August, and 6.4 landed yesterday, along with a lot of other VMware stuff. So I don't know if it got lost. Everyone was sort of thinking vSphere, 6.5, all that, which is awesome. But 6.4 landed. So you've got things like predictive DRS, which you're going to need to have vSphere 6.5 to take advantage of, but there's support for that in there. Loads of new dashboards. I'm not going to try and tackle all of them now. The vCenter solution configuration has been altered. It's much easier. There was a menu where you used to be able, when you first connected up vCenter to vROps, it was a really helpful wizard, and people wanted to see that every time they wanted to connect to it rather than just once off. So that's come into it. Certificate management has been improved. You get to see the data collection status of the adapters. Loads of API work has been done, well worth a look at there. Hardening guides, so before there was only 5.5 support for the hardening guides, so if you're familiar with the hardening guides, now you can do it with 6. Essentially that's applying policies in vROps and then telling you if you comply or not. I will give you a word of warning, if you switch that on, you're going to have Alert City until you've got your house in order. So don't switch it on until you're ready to take it on. Self-health for vROps has been improved massively. There are new health dashboards for the components from VMware. So, you'd think VMware would have that, really slick and done. They're playing catch up now. So things like VRA and other components, they're producing dashboards or management packs for that, and you can grab them from the Solutions Exchange. The UE and the UX has been improved greatly, and they're still working on that. And at the bottom, you can see the little oh yes, SNMP filters. So if any of you have been trying to do alerting or any other kind of features via SNMP from vROps to a middleware or an endpoint, there was no way of filtering it. It was literally fire hosing on, and you had to kind of cut your way through all of the stuff to get what you're interested in. You can now just trigger that based on filters, which is really helpful, really useful. Okay, so what's self-healing datacenter? Well, I put it up there. I ended up deciding to Google it rather than trying to make it up myself and see what the world thought a self-healing datacenter was. Have a quick read if you want. Essentially, you're taking the system and you're saying, right, I'm going to give you a set of rules and constraints that I want you to look at yourself, and if I've told you that this isn't healthy, then you go away and do it automatically or programmatically. That's one way of putting it. There's another way up there. Joe Bagley touched on this morning, intelligent, invisible infrastructure. This is the way things are going to go. I know not many people are adopting self-healing data centers for good reason. You know, at the end of the day, people want control. And a lot of IT guys I know are really hot on control. And I don't mean CIO kind of, what are you doing? It's more about they like to know everything that's going on. They don't want stuff happening overnight and everything going down, because there is a risk involved there. You're taking a chance if something's going to automatically run overnight. You know, the pros there are you didn't get woken up by a pager or an angry customer. The cons could be if you got it wrong, what do I do? But people are going to start to want this stuff. You know, yeah, there's 24-hour support on that, but who wants to be up at 3 in the morning? I don't. So, you know, that's part of the reason behind this. So, use cases. So we'll start off with the sort of the simpler ones. You know, you can free up compute. Now, who hasn't had the challenge of, you know, you've got your end users or your customers and that, and their over-provisioning is probably one of the biggest issues. You know, people would much rather be safe. You know, oh, the vendor tells me 2 CPUs, so I'm going to go 4 or 8. And that's fine until you've got lots of those machines on your environment. It's not only generating waste, but you've got to think about CPU ready and all of those other issues. So you can programmatically, or at least manually, look at this through vROps and say, actually they're oversized, or this VM isn't actually in use. And if you wanted to take it a step further, if you're thinking about applications that you might have applications that are running hot and cold. So if you've got your applications running really hot over the weekend, but during the week, they're not doing anything, you don't want them burning up compute or space, power them down automatically. Why do you want to do that manually? So, you know, there's one use case. You can scale back your applications, but that does require a cloud management platform, VRA. If you want to know more about VRA, don't ask me, ask people like Sam McGowan. But you can do that, it's very possible. This is the bit that I find sort of more exciting, keeping your critical apps running. So, hypothetically, let's say, you know, you've got your web services running, you've got your website, you've just had a TV advert run, loads of people are hitting your website unexpectedly. You've had your website running, vROps has been monitoring it a long time, so it knows what the norm is. Suddenly, your CPU usage goes through the roof because of valid traffic, not DDoS or anything negative. So you want it to be able to scale it up automatically. So you can configure it to go, oh, right, okay. I've got 3 web servers there with a back-end database. The web servers are starting to cook off. If you don't have the option to scale out via VRA or any other option, you can scale up. So you can add CPU or add memory on the fly. That's a really compelling use case. Past constraints. So as I said before, with vROps, or rather vCops, it was possible via VRO, which is now, VCO, orchestrator, which is now vRO. You could use that with a fairly old pack, which identified some of the SNMP information coming out of vROps or vCops. It required SNMP. It required some time to develop, and it was a lot of trial and error. So it wasn't just point and click and it just worked. It didn't. It did work, but you know, you had to put a lot of effort in. I saw a few blog posts from yesteryear of guys that got this working, but it never really lifted off because frankly it was a pain in the ass. The one thing that I will point out though is it's not all negative. So there are things that you can do by pushing stuff out to vRO or tools, middleware of that sort, that will leverage more things. So there are limitations to what vROps can do for you. I'm not going to cover all of that now, but don't assume that that's all negative. I'm just simply telling you that was what the past was. If you want to go and sort of stretch your legs more beyond what vROps can do for you via the Automation Action Framework, then. So moving on, so we talk about free up compute from an automation point of view using vROps. Another use case which I really like personally is the critical apps and focusing on critical apps. So if they're running hot, you've got web services, you don't want them to fall over. So if they're really busy, you've had a TV advert, your web services are getting thrashed, lots of users, so this is good, you know, money's coming in, but you don't want your web services falling over, and then you don't want the MD on the phone going, what the hell? You know, you want it to, either you're going to get paged to fix it, wouldn't it be better if it's scaled up automatically, scaling up that CPU? The reason I'm focusing on that foot rather than scaling out is this is purely the functions of vROps within itself. If you want to be able to scale out applications, you can still utilize vROps to alert on that and then send notifications off to a cloud management platform. So the past constraints, It was possible with vCops and using VCO, which is now vRO. It required SNMP, which anyone that's worked with SNMP, yeah, it's an industry standard if you're familiar with it. It's just a bit of a pig to use, especially if you're climbing through all of the stuff. It took time and effort to develop in VCO. So to get it to actually work and do the things that you wanted it to do, you had to put all the time and the effort in. It wasn't already present like it is in vROps. In short, it was a pain in the bum to get working. However, I will say this, if you want to be able to do other funky things that are outside of what the actions in vROps can give you, you're probably going to need to go down this route anyway. It's better supported now in vRO, but what I'm going to focus on is all the actions and the automation action framework, which will cover a lot of use cases for you. Okay, so we'll look at an overview now. So we're focusing on this bit here and these bits down here, but this is to show you what is possible as well. So vROps can, you can have your alerts and your policies. If you're getting heavy load or you know that you need to deploy or stretch your applications, you can zoom over to VRA and do that. Using the automation action framework and the Python adapter that we'll come on to in a little bit, you can basically make calls to vCenter and you can scale up your VMs automatically as well. So that can be CPU or RAM, and you can scale it back, but that would require restarts. But the point of this is that you want to scale it without interruption. What are the components? Python adapter, we'll come to that in a little bit. That came along in vROps, I think it was in 6.1, maybe before, but it's there now. The automation action framework, which again, another component inside vROps. REST and SNMP, so you'll need that if you want to use the other facilities. Custom policies, so how many of you are familiar with policies in vROps? Yeah, cool. Custom groups, how many of you made custom groups in vROps before? Yeah, okay, you're going to need these. Custom alerts, anyone done any custom alerts before yet? Okay, same guy again, yeah. You'll need a vCenter, of course, and if you're going to be doing the other fancy bits, you'll need a cloud management platform. So the Python's adapter. Really cool component, it hooks straight into vCenter. All you have to do is give it your permissions, so it could be an admin account, service account, whatever you want it to be, and it'll hook straight into vCenter and carry out a certain list of actions. There are 10 or 15 available, and I think that's growing. There are plans in the future for custom actions that you can do in Python. I know that that's coming. I don't know any more than that. It's very simplistic. So if you're not into vRO, you're not a developer, let's say you're a small place, you haven't got the time or the money perhaps, you've just got vROps, you don't need to do any special programming here. It's already there, you just hook it in, set up vROps correctly, and off you go. You've got some fundamental automation. Where is it? So this image here is from everything before 6.3. 6.3 landed in August and 6.4 has just come out. So here you can see the Python adapter. So you're selecting the vSphere adapter at the top there, and you can see underneath the Python's adapter. You'd click that and you'd click the little cogs there, and you can configure it with a service account, or if you wanted to use the same account that you're accessing vCenter with. With 6.3 and 6.4, that's been removed, and all you need to do is go into the vCenter adapter configuration, tick a box, and then you can either choose to use the same credentials as you're using, or you can give it a separate service account. I would lean towards the latter for security, but also auditing purposes. The automation action framework, so automation. So this is policy driven. What does that mean? You've got your policies in there, so you want to automate the correct objects. So you don't want everything to be automated, so it's got to be policy driven. You don't want it to just switch it on and everything just goes bananas. You want to have control over that. You want to be able to automatically execute and recommend actions on alerts. So what does that mean? When you have an alert, you can add recommendations. So that can usually be just text. So let's say it's specific to your environment. You've got an alert and it says, this CPU is really busy. Well, what do? it might be that you've created this alert specific for this application, because it might be a unique issue, and there might be some instructions in there that says, yeah, go and restart this service, blah, blah, blah. That's one area, but you can also add these actions, and they can either be manually triggered via a button, which I'll show you later, or you can have it automatically done, which is the whole point of the presentation. Fully tracked recent tasks page, which you'll see a little bit later as well. For auditing purposes, this is really important. Two reasons. One, you can prove that it was automatically done, not manually done. You can also see if it tried to do it and failed. So if you saw nothing happen, you think, oh, did I break something? If it tries and fails, it will tell you, which is really useful. And you don't have to trawl through endless logs to find it. It's right there. You can also see if anyone manually did it. So if somebody's saying, oh, no, it did it automatically, boss. Oh, really? It's important from an auditing point of view, basically. Enhanced resize up and down, so that's simply you can scale up, scale down, those kinds of actions. When you're scaling down, that's going to require a reboot. I won't get too stuck in the nitty-gritty, but if you've got more questions about all of this, come and see me afterwards. Most of the actions are more automable, not all. Now, I know this, I think one of the only ones that you can't do automatically, at least at the last time I looked, was one of the move actions, and that's physically moving a VM, I think, across data centers. But all of the other ones you can do automatic. I think that's going to change. I think VM were a little bit nervous about doing that automatic because it could cause all sorts of fun. So, yeah. Requirements checklist. Okay, so what do we need to make this work? Your operating system needs to support hot add. So if you're, I'm going to take Windows for example, if you've got your Windows, you'll need ideally Data Center Edition or Enterprise if that exists anymore. Essentially that will allow you to hot add CPU and RAM to the operating system. Your application also needs to support this. So again, going back to what I was saying before, this is all about not restarting the VM. It's all about hot adding and just making it seamless. So you need to make sure that your application, so let's say it's SQL Server, if it's standard edition, you cannot hot add a CPU to it. I did do once and found out the hard way in the past when we tried to add a CPU to it, and SQL didn't like that very much at all. So, you know, make sure you got your ducks in a row before you try doing this. Set up a POC, use it in a lab, make sure it all works before you roll it out in production. Your VM needs to also be configured. So if you're familiar with the vSphere client, you can go into the VM and you can configure hot plug and hot, those are settings you can add. That needs to be enabled, otherwise what will happen is vROps will go away and try and do it, and it won't, and it will fail. You need to make sure that in the global settings, enable automation is on. It is on by default, but I've seen people think, oh crap, I want that switched off. It's not going to do anything. It's just a feature that's on by default. There are other links in the chain that have to happen, which you can't do by accident. So just because that's on by default in the global settings, it doesn't mean your environment's suddenly going to go crazy. You need to configure the Python adapter, as I explained before, so you need to give yourself a service account, hook it into vCenter, and you're good to go there. You need custom groups. Okay, why do I need a custom group? So typically you're not going to want to do this. You're not going to be protecting virtual machines or applications if they're not critical. So really you're going to be protecting those critical applications, and typically you'll put them in a custom group. Why do we want a custom group? It's because you're likely to use a custom policy. So you'll have a normal policy, your default policy that you have for your environment that's unique to you. You will need another policy for that group, because in that policy is where it's basically referencing, am I allowed to automate this? It's very important. So custom groups are your friend, use them. Custom policies, use them. You'll need a custom alert. So there are lots of alerts that come out of the box. Some of them might suit your needs. What I would suggest you do as advice is clone the alert that you're interested in that looks about right and tailor it to your needs. Avoid editing default policies or default alerts, because if you're going to do upgrades, they may get overwritten and reset, and you don't need that drama. If you've put a lot of work in and that gets overwritten, that's not funny. A quick notion about hot plug and number. If you switch this on, and this is why you don't want to do it for all your VMs, you need to be aware of this. Okay, I'm not going to spend a long time on this, I just want to flag it to you, so you don't just switch this on for all of your VMs in your environment. If you want to know more about it, check out Frank Denneman's blog on this. You will not find a finer article or set of articles on this subject matter. So if you want to understand more about this, check that website out. So how does it all come together? How does the event flow? You know, how does it all trigger? So you get your workload. The workload is being monitored all the time. Your policies set thresholds for you. So it's running hot, it's over the threshold. Policy goes, okay, it's over the threshold. An alert gets triggered because of that threshold. Then goes back to the policy to see, am I allowed to automate this? The action then gets triggered, which could be scale up, add a CPU or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. The VM config then gets changed. The action is then logged as well, whether it's good or bad, so whether it's successful or failed, and you have a happy customer. It's that simple. So how does it do it? Does it actually do it? Okay, so this is a VM that I put up. I put these slides together a little while ago. So this VM, its sole purpose, it just has one CPU. I have a little tool on there called Heavy Load, which is free to download, and all it does is generate load. Either fills up your RAM or does your CPU. Very simple use case. So I've switched it on. You can see CPU usage is 100% on this VM. You can see inside vROps that the CPU is also running hot. So taking back our use case that your application or your VM is running very, very hot. You've set your policy to whatever it is you want. You've got all your alerts in place. Just because it's running hot doesn't mean it's automatically going to trigger the action. This is where you need to get your policies and work through it to get it done right, so it's not just scaling up because of 5 minutes of usage. You're going to get peaks and troughs like any environment. The good thing about vROps is it has dynamic thresholds. Who's familiar with dynamic thresholds? Okay. Dynamic thresholds essentially is figuring out what is normal for that object, that virtual machine. So one virtual machine might run hot over a weekend and be very quiet during the week. And after a period of monitoring from vROps, it will know that that's the norm and won't generate alerts if it's running hot on the weekend because it knows that's normal. That's essentially what a dynamic threshold is. It knows the normality of your environment. So when you first put vROps in, it figures this all out after a period of time. It's kind of why our people pay the money for it. So you're not getting alert storms for nonsense. Stuff is going to be re-indexing or payrolls are going to be running. I don't care about that. I know it's doing that. Tell me what's wrong, please. Anyway. So your custom alerts triggered. So we can see here the recommendation that we talked about earlier. It's saying, let's add more CPU to this virtual machine. It's running hot. Here is the button I was referring to earlier. So if we didn't have automation on, you could click that button in the alert. So let's say it's triggered off to your help desk software. You've seen the alert come in. The engineer goes in, sees that, and he can choose to click that button. And then it will give him a recommendation on whether it's an extra 1 CPU, 2 CPUs, or it could be memory, whatever it is. That recommendation, and it will then go away and do it for you. Well, here we can see it's been done programmatically via the automation action framework. So this is the same VM that we were looking at earlier. And we can see on the task manager, it's saying the number of installed processes has changed. I don't know if that's clear over there, but the data displayed is invalid. So essentially telling you something has changed there. So I click Restart Task Manager here, and we've got 3 CPUs instead of 1. That, is, in essence, is one way of proving that this works. Just wanted to give you that kind of visual cue. And here you can see the CPU usage is still banging away, but it's only on 1 core, so 33%. And there's the other 2 cores there, happy. This is the recent task page, so auditing. So not only did this VM get extra CPU, but it also got extra memory. I wasn't going to focus on that, but it also decided that this thing needed more memory. And you can see here it completed, otherwise it would say failed. Here you can see what object it was, and you can click through here. You can see it was a virtual machine. You can see what alert triggered it. You can say whether it's local, and you can also see whether it was automated or not, which is one of the critical things there in terms of auditing. Here we can see the same VM. Workload is now normalized. Happy campers. I'm going to quickly show this video as well, and then talk over it. Are any of you familiar with the webinar series that I've been doing with Sunny Dua? No? Okay, I'll cue that a little bit later. This was the first webinar that we did. I did the live demo of this working. So you can see just then I set up a VM and fired off the 100% CPU usage. You can see from here, I put them in custom groups there on the left-hand side, and you can see I've been doing an awful lot of workload on these throughout the week or two beforehand to essentially get this to work. So you can see I've been thrashing the hell out of the VMs to get them to trigger, so I could essentially get it to trigger in that time space for the webinar. This here shows you the risk chart, so when it was running hot, or rather the stress chart, not the risk chart. You can see here, that's on an hourly basis. So, you know, green is normal, red is, probably want to check that. If you're familiar with vROps, this is a really useful way of identifying when your VMs are busy. So if someone says, oh yeah, it's only busy on the weekends, and you've had it in there for a couple of weeks, you can actually see where it is actually busy. Now here we can see dynamically, it's provisioned the CPU, so I've done a zoom in there, very dramatic, not particularly Hollywood, sorry for the quality. They actually said this was high def, but I kind of disagree. So yeah, this had been running for about a couple of hours beforehand. I wanted it to trigger within the hour window, and you'll see very shortly when I get to the point of actually clicking reset the task manager, that you'll see the cores getting added. I think if there's anything else, just wanted that to click that, and then we'll move on to the next slide. There we go. So it's not just Photoshop, it's actually doing it, guys. Okay. That's pretty awesome stuff, if you ask me. That's the way things are going to go. Embrace it, or, you know, might not be the way that you want to work. You might not be comfortable with automation in this fashion, but this is going to be the demand in the future. People want agility, they want flexibility, they want everything. So that's one way of doing it. So let's have a quick review. Use your custom groups. Use your own policies. Don't use the default policy. Again, because it will get overwritten with updates. So use your own policy. Even if you're not going to modify it, just clone it, call it your own, call it Bob's policy. That'll be fine. Custom alert definitions, create those. Choose the action that you want to assign to that alert. So it might be that you want to just focus on memory or CPU, whatever it might be. There are a number of actions in there. One quick tip, if you want this to work, the recommendation or the action that you want needs to be the first recommendation, because you can have a number of recommendations on your alert. It needs to be the first one for it to trigger. This is a quick plug for a webinar series I've been doing all year with Sunny. We've got 2 to go. We've got one next week, which I think I can be cheeky and tell you it will be on PowerShell. So if you like PowerShell, come and join us. Or if you can't, it'll be actually Singapore time. So that's not conducive to many people. It's about 6:30 in the morning this time. But the recording will be posted up afterwards anyway. That's it, guys. Any questions? Yes. What will happen when you scale down is it will require a reboot. So because you're scaling down, that has to happen. There's no way around that. Yeah. But remember, your OS needs to support all of that. I mean, typically a reboot, yeah, you'll have to reboot to scale down. Yeah. It would depend on the application. So yeah, I mean that particular, it was a very loose demo, so it was only using one core.
So in your experience, what would be applications of vROps that that would actually really benefit from this? I think you already mentioned SQL Server, right?
Yeah.
And then Exchange.
Yes.
And any other easy winners out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't explored it enough to know. So, you know, I don't have SAP HANA to hand to do tests like that. So anyone wants to donate me a really big lab and I can do tests, that'd be fabulous. But yeah, I think it's really going to be trial and error on that, but definitely lab it first, get it right, because you don't want to roll this into production and you get it wrong, because you get kicked for it. Yeah.
So if you share it in LP and stuff like that, what that looks like?
So you're thinking triggering alerts and making that happen, what, as in?
For example, you want to unlock the service accounts
Okay, yeah, I think, yeah, you could probably do that via a REST call, because what you can do custom notifications. So one of the things I showed you earlier about filters, the filters are not just for SNMP, you can filter them via email, REST, that kind of thing. So if something's going to trigger, you can also fire off REST, or I think REST is probably the best option, to be honest. Ooh. No. Be separate alerts. But then on my example there, 2 alerts fired anyway. One was for memory, one was for CPU. But you can't have 2 automobile actions on an alert that I know of at the moment. No, I think it's quite comfortable with what it's got, but if you want to do anything fancy, an example, you know, if you want to provision data stores or take advantage of stuff that's outside of the actions that are available in vROps, then vRO and vRA and things like that would be the way to go. All right, so those weren't custom actions, those were custom alerts. The actions that are available in vROps are fixed at the moment. I do know down the line that may change. I'm aware of things in NDA, but I simply can't tell you. But just assume that that's coming. Yes. As long as the information's coming into vROps, if it's an alert, then you can do what you want with it. No, Python adapter is purely connected to vCenter. Correct. Yeah. Okay, so a scheduled thing. No, you can't schedule it. No. I'm trying to think if there's a way to do that. Yeah. No, there isn't a scheduling option with it that I'm aware of at the moment. But yeah, that's a good use case actually. Yeah. Well, it would be, in terms of change control, you would agree in advance that these things would be protected in this fashion. And therefore, it depends how rigid your change control is. And change control may say, no, I don't want this altogether. But then they're dinosaurs. Okay, right. So remember, you'll see the alerts come up. So if you want to keep tabs on that specifically, and it's a concern, and let's face it, if you were going to roll this out in a production environment, you're going to want to keep an eye on it. So not only can you have alerts triggering actions, but those alerts can trigger emails, so you can keep an eye on it. So if you see that a VM has been given CPU and then given CPU, you'll start to see that trend. So, and a lot of people typically hook. Trying to think if there's a way of limiting it now. Oh, sure, yeah. I'd need to check, actually. That's a good question. I know that there was an issue with it before, which you didn't see when I showed in the video. There were lots of failed attempts to scale up because they'd been scaled up before. And what was happening was, at that time, and this was a bug, I might add, vROps was trying to scale the VM up far too high than the host could cope with. So my host had, I think, 8 cores, and it wanted to go to 11. And of course it failed because it was only, and I fed that back to VMware, and they're sorting that out, essentially. It should be taking into account the available, cores on that system. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want it to fail. I want it to take the maximum it can if it needs it. I don't want it to, it might be recommending it. It might need 12. But if it gives me 8, at least that's something over 2. That was kind of the premise behind that. But in your case, limitation, yeah, I'd need to have a look. Yeah, I think there is, but I'd need to take a look. But I'm not, yeah, so that would be, grab me afterwards. Any other questions?
Is it possible to integrate with VRA? With VRA, scale in or scale out?
Talk to this man. Yes, it is. It is. It's very possible. Yeah.
So you're saying it's not intelligent enough to scale up if cluster is also not constrained?
Well, this is where you have to apply intelligence yourself. If you know that you've got a cluster that's already cooking off, you're not really going to switch that on. You're not going to, I mean, everyone's going to have constraints in their environments. They're going to be different from other people. Some people have got resources coming out the wazoo. Other people, you know, their hosts are glowing red because, you know. Yeah, exactly. But but this is the thing. If you switch it on, you're telling it, I can let you do that anyway. So, but you've got to approach this in an intelligent fashion. Don't just switch it on. You've got to look at your environment before you switch it on. And if you're going to protect your critical apps, I'm going to assume that your critical apps are on an environment that can take that. If you're going to try and scale stuff up on an already oversubscribed host, I'm going to question your sanity, to be honest. So, yeah. Yeah, good question. I think it's only cores that I could remember seeing on it. No, actually, no, I think it said vCPU, so no, I don't think it's cores. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it says vCPU on the action.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Is your concern that it will? Is your concern on that it will do it sort of every half an hour or something crazy like that? No, it doesn't go that fast. So what it will do? The examples that I was showing there was a very accelerated process. For me to get it to trigger on recording, I had to alter the policies to a ridiculously aggressive level just to get it to fire. So that what you see there is not the norm. It's not going to do that every 5 minutes. That would be bonkers. But you still need to take into account what you've got. Have you got headroom to scale up? You know, those kinds of things. And I take your point about, you know, rogue apps, but really that would come down to alerting and help desk tickets as well. If you've not got your finger on the pulse there, I wouldn't enable automation anyway from that point of view. But it's still a valid point. Yep. Right, so predictive has just come in with 6.4. I haven't had a chance to play with it. So 6.4 went GA yesterday. And I've got it downloaded, but I have not played with it. That's predictive DRS. Oh, I haven't looked at it actually. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of scheduling or predictive. Yeah, there isn't a scheduling option yet, but that would be very cool, actually. Yeah, there are ways of doing it, but you know, orchestration and those kinds of things. This is purely reactive. So I'm thinking of the use case, you know, over the weekend, you know, your adverts have ran in between an EastEnders marathon or whatever the hell's on that people are popular, and suddenly your website's getting inundated. You want to be able to react. Come on, you want to scale up. You know that you're on a certain threshold. If it happens, it can scale up and take the load in an appropriate fashion. That's all this is about. But predictive stuff, yeah, that would be super cool if that was in there. Yeah. Any other questions? Ooh. If it's an alert in vROps, yes, basically. As long as you've got an alert in vROps, you can then tailor it to your whim. Host reboot. No, I think it's all VM specific. Yeah.